Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of the Option Menu Crew podcast. Your hosts today for episode 24 are me, Ryan. We have with us today Ed. How you doing, Ed?
I'm good. I'm good to be here.
And we've also got Mike with us again today. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pardon me, my voice is a little froggy today, but we'll try to push through it. No particular reason. I think I've just been spending some late nights playing new Resident Evil Village, and that's just the way things have fallen. But I need to get some better sleep. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, despite what some people might think. Today, the link that you saw, the picture that you will see, the image, and all the titles and all that stuff from this episode, is that we are continuing our conversations on monetization of video games. And we've worked our way to the topic today, which is what should the base price of games be? Now, that's a very loaded topic. I am completely aware, but all around the conversations, and I think everything kind of stems back from, what should be the default price we're paying, and this has become a very apt conversation considering that with the introduction of the new generation of consoles, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, is that seemingly, well, it's definitely Sony, and I think Microsoft hasn't to some extent, but some third parties are taking Sony's lead, and the price is getting hiked for new games from 60 to 70, at least for America. The price is changed differently throughout the country, or throughout the world, excuse me. And then there's exchange rates and all that because games do not cost necessarily the same in every region. And we'll touch a little bit about that but honestly, we just don't have a ton of research for that. But trying to just talk about what we know from our consumer standpoint and what information's out there about what goes into those base prices of the game, what goes into that base $60 as our starting point. Is there justification for the prices going up? Thinking about all the other aspects, DLC, subscriptions, free to play, where do these things fall into? And just kind of having the conversation about, is it fair that those default prices are going up? Is there really a justification for it? Could there be a justification for it? Which, of course, there could be. Um, but looking at the realities as we can tell right now, and then kind of having a discussion about all these elements as like consumers, what sounds the most fair? And that's usually what we've been going for. So, Mike or Ed, did you want to have open up on any of your comments, like how do you feel about paying $60 right now? We'll go Ed then Mike. How do you feel about paying $60 right now? How do you feel about the $70 new gen tax? And where do you usually like to? What are the price point you usually like to buy a brand new game at?
I don't mind paying $60. I guess it depends on the game. I know you and I both recently bought the Near Replicant
Mm-hmm.
remaster. Not a remaster. It's a version upgrade.
Right. Yeah.
But I felt that was worth it. I am usually more willing to pay $60 for a game that's in a series that I like and I want to support so that it will, have future entries, particularly if it's more of a niche title where, if not enough people buy it, they might not make another one.
Mm-hmm.
And for series that I'm not 100% sure on, I usually wait until they go down in price
Mm-hmm.
if it's something that I haven't played before. But I do buy a fair amount of games at $60. And, Nintendo games I don't usually wait on because they don't go down much in price. And if they do go down, it's maybe like $10 or $20 a couple years later. So, there's not like, I bought Fire Emblem Three Houses at full price, and I don't regret that. I'll probably buy the new Mario Golf that comes out in a month or two at full price. I mean, those ones, like, they will go down, but not by much. So,
Mm-hmm.
and part of me appreciates that fact because then there's no like calculus I have to perform of like, when do I buy this? When am I going to get the best deal? Like, I know there is no best deal, at least for the most part. So I just buy it when I want to play it. So,
Mm-hmm.
that actually is helpful to me in in a funny way where if I know something's, that's just going to be the price, I don't have to, wring my hands about getting the best price, because it is kind of like part of my personality. Like, I like to get the deal, and if that isn't a factor, then it is a little less stressful for me to purchase those games.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And actually, you brought up some interesting points that I'll ask questions on after this. But now, Mike, same question to you. How do you feel about $60, and what do you usually spend when buying a brand new game?
I think that $60 seems a little bit high. I think it should be like $50 for like the standard price
Okay.
for games. But yeah, usually like Nintendo games, I buy at full price usually for the most part because it's so hard to find deals.
Yeah.
And then other games like I've waited until I got the PS4 late, so a lot of games on there I got for like $20.
Hmm.
But like yeah, 70, like I don't know if it needs to be that high. Like I don't know if the game costs that much to make or it needs to be that high, so I don't know. I don't like it.
Okay. And so I think 60's been pretty fair. I agree with Ed on a lot of the points that like you can always wait for a sale if you're not confident in getting the game. I also personally like to do a bunch of other um, ways of playing games. So like I'm subscribed to GameFly. I also have Game Pass on PC. So I go and try those games there, or I always try to look up a demo and do renting. So I always try to save myself money in the long term by getting the sample and being more confident in my purchase. So that way I'm not spending full price on something I'm not confident in. And that doesn't mean I haven't made mistakes in the past where I've bought a game, I've been disappointed because I thought it was something better, but I've been much better at seeking out a trial before I buy. And so that's the thing too, is that the prices can fluctuate over time, and we're trying to focus more on like what should that initial dollar amount be. But Ed, you brought up an interesting point here. So the question, I hadn't thought about this, and this is just kind of more of a fun speculative point, is do you think that like new IP games should be cheaper to start because they're like not established of that? And I'm not saying this needs to be regulation. You can actually weigh in on whether or not you feel like that could be like a regulation rule, or if you just think like that's a smarter business move. Like if someone's putting out a new IP, should they charge less than 60 to try and generate interest? And then like, would you be okay with sequels being more expensive because now it's established? So it's like, oh, clearly if the quality's there. Like, how would you feel about that?
I feel like from a business perspective, that might backfire on them because everyone's like, "Oh man, this game's $40. What? The sequel's $60? I didn't pay that for the first game." So
Mm-hmm.
like, that might be setting a low expectation. And I also think that like psychologically, there's like a value proposition there where
Mm-hmm.
people perceive a cheaper game as being less, lower quality. So I don't know if that really is a good idea. I don't. Maybe I'd be more willing to take a risk on a new IP that was cheaper, but it might also I don't I it might also be hard for them to make a profit if they're don't know if it, like they might not make up the sales in higher numbers to justify the lower price. I don't think it needs to be that way, and I
Okay.
think it would probably not be beneficial to the publisher to pursue that type of pricing scheme.
Yeah, I'll get into my thoughts in just a minute. And then, Mike, same question to you is, what do you think about if like a new game that's, brand new title? Um, so like, for example, with Nintendo, it would be like when Splatoon 1 was first created. Do you think that should be like sold at like 40 and then as sequels go on, like it makes sense for it to be more expensive? How would you feel about that?
I think that's a good idea to get people like initially interested in it. Although I don't know if like somebody might perceive that as being like, oh, it's not as high quality if it's like set at a lower price.
Yep. and that was the point I wanted to comment on most is you're both right about like there's a psychological effect and it's a training that we've all been gone through as a consumer is that well you get what you pay for, which we know is not true. But that's the other, and that's the thing I wanted to say. We know that's not true. We know that there are games that we've paid $60 for that are not that good, and we know there are indie games out there that are sold for less than 60 that people would attest are way more worth the value than some AAA games out there. So I don't know if that's just like a matter of time, like a deconditioning, or being more open to different price aspects, or not judging so harshly about the price. But there is a correlation, and it's usually reinforced because they usually charge more for something in order to show its premium, or sometimes like Apple products even, they charge a premium because they claim they're premium, even though we know that it's it's a lot more than it needs to be. Just like price wise, it's a lot more than it needs to be, and they're like equivalent Android devices that are good that don't have to be there, but someone's setting a precedent, and then people go like, oh well, that must mean this, and that's more I think it's correlation than causation. Well, that's what I'm trying to go for. I might not
Yeah,
have phrased it
you know
properly.
where we started getting $1,000 phones was with the iPhone 10. That was
Mhm.
like the first phone that was $1,000. So yeah, they've all like Apple has definitely raised the bar on the price expectation, and Android phones have followed. So perhaps if Apple hadn't set that bar, then maybe Android phones would be less expensive too. You got a
Mhm.
point there.
But can't you could still find Android phones that are really cheap, right? Like $100.
Yeah, let's not get into the phone conversation.
Right, but I think it's the only correlation I was trying to draw is like the way the prices work. Also, I was going to say for like think about phones. I know they're different types of products, so that's a valid counterpoint. Is that well, a phone versus a game shouldn't be treated the same, which I could see. Um, but trying to talk some hard numbers, but then that disconnection between stuff because like it's the value of the product, and yes, a lot of the value is subjective. Just like how Ed, you and I have gone back and forth. Like you love Death Stranding and 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I have also played and beaten both. I played and beat Death Stranding on my own. You talked me into buying 13 Sentinels, which I wouldn't have bought. Now I did buy it on sale, and that's the reason I bought it. I'd rented it and I plan on trying it there. But then Sony ended up having a sale on PlayStation and sold it for half price at the time, which is great. So I got it for a deal, bought it digitally, played through it, and going through them like I'm glad I paid 30 instead of 60. I would have still preferred to just watch that on YouTube because the gameplay wasn't satisfying to me in any way, but the story was really good, and I would have liked to experience that story and see like, oh, they tried this because there was tons of people online talking about how great that game was, and I still agree like the story's good. And there's a similar feeling for like Near Replicant, but that's a little more known. Like it's an action RPG. I like action RPGs, so the fact that they just improved the combat makes that game infinitely better for me, and I have a certain tolerance for the other stuff that's going on, and knowing that the story there is also amazing. So it's like, all right, passable gameplay with an amazing story, so I can easily just work my way through that. And to your point, 13 Sentinels is passable gameplay. Personally, it's completely personal. Like that gameplay was not worth it to me. But I could see someone else, on the other side going like they're going to play through Near and like that gameplay is not satisfying enough no matter how good the story is, and they'll just YouTube cutscenes and stuff like that. And that's valid. Everyone gets to spend their time how they want, and taste will dictate a lot of that stuff. Um, but what I was trying to get into is what this conversation is supposed to be about is more about analyzing what kind of hard numbers, and that's a point that I think we need to start with the conversation overall. Is that a lot of this stuff isn't transparent. The game industry spends a lot of time trying to hide what the costs and things are behind the scenes. They don't really want us to know. From the fact that NPD, I think, still doesn't count digital sales. A lot of digital sales for copies of games are not released for the companies. They really don't have any incentive to do so for the most part. Um, we get comparisons to the movie industry all the time. So the movie industry is pretty upfront about just like, well, this movie's going to have this big a budget. We don't always know that for games. Like sometimes it's a talking point.
Yeah, like movies, you can search any Wikipedia page for a movie has budget and box office. Like it's trivial to find out if a movie was profitable.
Yeah. Um, and that's the thing is like we can, and even for the movie industry, I haven't looked into that, but it seems like it's a lot easier to dissect those numbers. Like they're more upfront, and you know like what the marketing budget was versus the production budget, etc. You know when there's like rewrites and things like that, or you even can look up like salaries for the specific actors and things like that. And some of those deals also get like publicized for video games.
Isn't there like a subscription to IMDb where you can get all this like pre-production information? I think there is. Like you can subscribe to IMDb and you can get all like the pre-production data.
I'm not aware, but that would be really cool if that's true.
Yeah, there's IMDb Pro, and it's more like a resource for like entertainment people, but you can get all this like stuff about in development movies, and it's like I guess you could, you know, I'm not in the industry, so it doesn't make sense. But there is a lot of data that is available. Like I don't think you have to be in the industry to subscribe to that.
Very cool. And exactly. And that's the core of the point is that a lot of this information about the video game industry and those equivalent costs is unknown. We don't know exact dollar amounts for we can see speculative salaries for what it costs to be a developer at different levels, producer, director, etc. But we don't really know their salaries. Completely. We don't know what it costs necessarily for certification of a game on a store, licensing fees to put it on a platform. Like we don't know what Ubisoft pays to publish the next Assassin's Creed on PlayStation versus Xbox versus Nintendo Switch, etc. We don't know we don't all the time see what's the marketing budget for this game versus the development budget for this game. How much is it? How much are they allocating for the DLC costs for their season passes? There's just all these numbers that we don't know, and for like then there's the digital side. Pardon me, I meant physical side. The physical copies of games where they have to create the boxes, press the discs or the cartridges in the case of the Nintendo Switch, any of the other little materials that go in the box, which less and less over time, and then the cost for shipping those things out to the stores and whatnot. So there's all these factors that go into it, and I think it's fair to take that into consideration about like what is like fair for developers to charge. At the same time, I'm not necessarily saying we need regulation, but I think it's where there might be room for regulation to help protect consumers and make the business healthier. Because right now, business is kind of carte blanche to do whatever they want when it comes to pricing, which isn't inherently wrong. That leaves room for the developers and publishers to, when developers are self-publishing, to make good or bad choices. Someone could go, well, our newer game is a new game. We don't know if it's going to be great, but we're going to hedge our bets. Kind of like Rocket League or Fallout guys. Like they charged $20 when those first things came out.
Fall guys, not Fallout guys.
In my brain always. And you do fall out of the arena, so I don't think that's the worst thing, but yes, I like that music. Anyways, Fall Guys, excuse me, and Rocket League were both these like indie darling games that both also started out by being on PlayStation Plus for free. And they explode on those platforms, then they come to the other platforms for these decent prices. Rocket League has gone free to play after it's purchased by Epic. So that's a whole different thing, but that's not the initial launch. And a lot of these people get these games for cheap and they blow up, and then you realize like at least speaking from my perspective, I think there was about $60 worth of value in Rocket League, but the way they've transitioned to it being like a service with their events and of course all the microtransactions, which are terrible.
Do they have season passes?
They do have a new season pass type thing now.
But isn't it? It's free now, right?
It is free to play, so that is a bit different. But yeah, you can definitely play all the modes for free and all the basic content. It's just that you can't unlock a lot of customizations for your car without paying money, and that's a whole different debate for a different episode. We'll probably
is it cosmetic, the customizations? I don't want to go too
absolutely cosmetic.
Okay, well then
You could
we don't
argue
need to go too deep down that rabbit hole.
you could argue that some of the bodies for the cars, because there's like 3 different hitboxes to the cars, so that changes how the play works. Um, is a little bit gameplay. So if you don't have availability to all, which, but I do think you do. But if any of the specific body types from like unique cars, because they've done like the licensing for like the Batmobile from the Nolan films, they've done the Ecto one from Ghostbusters.
I
I,
believe that I believe that Batmobile from the Nolan films is called the Tumbler.
the Tumbler, okay, and then
Is
there's some.
the DeLorean in there?
Yes, and the DeLorean.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
so those things are in there, and some could argue that like the different effects on the cars could also affect gameplay based on that. But um, I'm not high enough level to really say that for sure. And that's kind of the side point. But yeah, those other aspects to it show like you can make a decision to go like, you know what, we know our game could be worth like 40, 50, $60 because of the replay value, but it's a new thing. People are probably going to think this is small because it's not a big blockbuster RPG action game that's taking you through and going to have you make you feel all the emotions. So we got to charge like $20 for it. And it leaves room, though this rarely happens, where game companies will charge at 60 or higher with their special editions and then the games flop hard. So we were just talking about before warming up with this is like Death Stranding. It's a game we don't really know the sales numbers on. We haven't seen like exact sales figures, which leads us to believe, because any company takes a chance at big PR, which is if that game had broken 1 million copies in like a week, we would have heard about it. If that game broke like 2 million in like 2 weeks, we would have heard about it. So clearly, it seems like this game hasn't broken 1 million units in sales, or they are so ashamed or that a Kojima game only sold 1 million that they're not even saying that. It's very interesting. But there is a quote from an article by Destructoid that Hideo Kojima, and this article is from June 1st, 2020, that Hideo Kojima says we surpassed the amount we needed to make a profit. So I think it sold well enough to be called a success. Which I think the more interesting take from that is if that level game, and we don't know the exact budget for that game, or at least I wasn't able to find that information for this conversation. Would love any new information. So, of course, any listeners who want to send us articles or links to resources for getting better data, absolutely would love to see it to further the conversation in future episodes. Um, is what does that mean? Then how many copies do they need to sell for that game to be profitable? And this is
Apparently it has this PSN has an estimated total of 3 million players. So it doesn't necessarily mean 3 million sales, but it's an idea.
Right. And that's another thing too, because people don't have to be subscribed to buy that game. So those numbers also are incomplete data.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question for the group is, when would you like to see a rule about how expensive a game should be, or where do you feel like, and we'll toss to Mike for this one, is you already said that you wanted to see games around like 50 or whatnot. So what do you feel is like, where would you want to see different types of games at the price points? Like you can name a few specific examples of like, okay, well this game, I paid this much for it, but I feel actually that type of game, that style is this. So at what types of games, and you can use examples of existing ones even if that's not what they came out at, where do you feel, for the conversation's sake, that they fit in at the different price tiers of like, even you can even say free to play if you want, but like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, like what level games does that make that? And it's okay to also say like, I don't think it's fair to even charge this for this, so I would never say that, and that's fine. But yeah, off of that, Mike, how do you feel? What makes the value for you?
Well, like where I would never say that it should be regulated. Like I don't think that it needs to be like a forced rule, but I
Okay.
think like a
Mm-hmm.
good standard price would be $50.
Mm-hmm.
But like Super Mario or the 3D World was, or no,
3D World plus
3D
Bowser's.
no 3D All Stars
Yeah.
Okay.
was sold for $60, and the Spyro Reignited trilogy sold for $40, and one was like a complete remaster, where the other one was just a remake of old games. Like
A port
that
of
doesn't
the three
a
games.
port,
Some
yeah,
or leave
Updated
some
ports.
of them weren't even ports. They just ran in an emulator, So I
yeah.
don't.
That
I think
doesn't
Sure,
seem
yeah.
like a fair.
I think 64 and Sunshine were both in the form of an emulator.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that's necessarily fair to charge $60 for something like that.
Okay. So what are your
Uh,
examples of max price games for you?
Max price games. Okay. So like, I get sports games, but I don't think that they should be charging. So for like Madden or something, the next edition of Madden, I don't think it should be $60 or $70. Like, all they did was update the roster and like maybe add like one new game mechanic or like one new mode or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I don't think that that needs to be like increasing every year. Like, it should just be at a set price of like $30. Like, every year I
Okay.
should be paying $30 for a game, a sports game.
Does Madden have microtransactions?
I don't.
Because I know
delve
FIFA
that
does.
deep into
I
it.
feel like FIFA, with the amount they get from microtransactions, should just be a free to play game. I mean, they're like triple dipping at that point. But
The thing is, there's like two different games inside FIFA because of that.
There might be microtransactions in
I think they're
Madden.
trying to
don't know.
add them, like because
I wouldn't put it past them.
yeah.
It's dumb.
But what? I mean, I think the question for you, Mike, is what is a $60 game for you? What game have you bought that you felt this is definitely worth the $60? And I mean, I what game have you personally bought? Because I feel like I know you get a lot of stuff for gifts, but like it seems like sometimes when you ask for stuff for gifts, it's stuff you wouldn't necessarily spend $60 on. So what have you put $60 of your own money for that was wholeheartedly worth it for you?
Um, I'd say like Jedi Fallen Order. That was really enjoyed that. I thought that was
Nice.
worth $60.
That's a solid choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
What about like the
Super
Spider?
Smash.
Okay, Super Smash Brothers Ultimate.
Yeah. Mario Kart. The new Mario Kart.
8 Deluxe, or do you mean just like 8 in general?
I just mean 8 in general.
Okay.
Like it kind of stinks to like rebuy it again for like, because I had it on the Wii U and then I bought it. I should just be able to like transfer it over to the Switch, because it's essentially pretty much.
They really should have done that. Would have been like a really nice goodwill thing to do, especially considering how little the Wii U sold. Like it wouldn't have been. I guess it would have cost some money, but like they could have even given you like an upgrade fee, like they did with the Wii Virtual Console. Like they certainly could have done something better for their fans.
So
And
gonna bring up
the same thing happened with 3D World.
Yeah. 3D World felt like a little bit more of an upgrade in some ways because they added Bowser's Fury,
And
but
online multiplayer.
yeah,
which wasn't even that good, but it,
no,
it was there.
That was bad.
And that's another value proposition where Nintendo puts in online, but it's so half baked. But here's the funny part. So just quickly on that note, Mario 3D World not having good online doesn't make any sense considering that Splatoon and Mario Kart, like Nintendo clearly can have good online in its games. Splatoon, I have not had a bad online from like the pure function part of like, okay, I get into a match, the game plays smoothly, I don't have like stutter and stuff like that. We've played Mario Kart 8 on so many times, and I think the only issue we've ever had is like weird disconnections. Never like, and that's only happened a handful of times. Every other time we've played dozens upon dozens of games online, no lag, no stutters, nothing like that. And I get
And
that
we
it can
don't even need Ethernet.
didn't even need Ethernet ports, yeah, or Ethernet connections, and those are fine. But then you've got Smash Bros. Ultimate and like Mario 3D, where it's like, why don't you just use good netcode? It's out there. Why don't you do it? And Nintendo clearly has the money for it. So what I'm trying to find out is
I wonder
okay.
how I haven't played it online, but I know Sackboy: A Big Adventure was basically like Sony's 3D World, and that one has online. I wonder if it plays well, because I don't know if like a platformer like that is hard to do online, but I bet Sony does do it well. But I'd be curious to find out because I haven't played that online.
Right.
But
And if
that's
there are
yeah,
other games that are like this that have good smooth online, then that means the netcode exists and it could be brought over to these games.
yeah.
So that's the point there. All right. So I looked up some data. According to inputmag.com, Mario Kart 8 for Wii U sold 8.4 million units, and that article's from April 16th, 2021. Um, so based on that, we know for a fact this game sold mostly for $60. Let's account for maybe some at $40.
50. Weren't Wii U games 50?
Oh, you're right. You're right. So let's calculate a bare minimum. 8.4 million units at $40 for for if a sale, because that's typically what Nintendo will put them on sale for, is like $40. Like now 60 to 40, we've seen some of those. Not counting retail sales, because like I just saw like a GameSpot or a Best Buy, a GameStop or Best Buy email ad that was like, get Mario Odyssey for $30. I'm like,
I saw that. Yeah, I think
yeah,
it sold out like instantly though.
yeah, exactly. But that's physical copies. Physical has
Yeah,
different rules than digital. So we're
yeah,
uh,
But Mario Kart 8
times.
also had DLC in the original run.
They did,
yeah.
but we're not counting that right now because the DLC
Yeah.
comes out later. Yeah, and I'm building to that point. So for at $40, they brought in 336 million just off of that. Well, actually, you know what? That actually brings up another point. That's how much that game made, or that's how much money that brought in from that. We don't know how much was the margin of that for the company versus that. But let's say it's at 336 million was the absolute gross of that. And then that
Right.
divides up into the uh, different parts there, because clearly there was a certain margin of that goes to retail, and then the rest goes to Nintendo and they recoup costs. But still, making that much, that's not even, that's discounting $10 there. So we don't even know. So then at 50, let's increase that a bit more. So
Did they release how much it sold on Switch? Or no.
yeah,
It's something like 36 million. It's a lot.
it's a lot more. 420 million uh, American for the sake of conversation. If it was when Mario Kart Wii U sold at 8.4 or $50 a piece. So we can speculate on that, and then let's say I don't know. Actually, I don't even know what the typical cut is for the retail there. For how much the retail stores keep for that. So even for that, for a very popular game on an unsuccessful platform, 8.4 million units. What we were talking about in previous conversations outside the podcast was like with Smash Brothers DLC. Smash has sold so much money that Nintendo really doesn't have a reason, or Nintendo could pay for the production of the DLC and not charge us for it, and just literally put out all the characters and the new stages and stuff as free will, or if it's free will, as goodwill gestures, because that game continues to sell. And at the same time, every time they add more characters, someone new might be picking up the game for the first time and then buying the
Right.
DLC. So if they're selling new copies of the game, or every time the DLC comes out, and they keep getting more and more sales, it's paying for itself, double to triple. So it almost doesn't even make sense why DLC gets charged extra for, because new people are always picking up the games. And then, as you guys have mentioned before, if games go on sale, people start biting the bullet. Even if they don't play it, they're like, oh, it's half price. Oh, it's $20 or $30. Yeah, like, or it's $40. It's $30. It's $20,
I can't
and they buy
afford
it.
not to buy it.
Exactly.
I mean,
And
I get that I didn't have to like buy it again, but then how would I like play with my friend? Like, how would
So
I
you
play
did
with
have
my
to
friends?
buy it. You did have to buy it again.
you did,
I guess.
but you did.
But
Well, you chose to buy it again. You didn't
yeah.
have to buy it again. That's the other part with like Nintendo is like
But then
they
I would be
or
missing
I'm
out.
not saying Nintendo with video games is that yeah we as consumers could choose not to, and there's that whole voting with the wallet thing, which I actually want to have that as a full separate conversation. But it's a little bit broken because dollars dollar votes are lopsided, and you see that in the mobile game market where like free to play whales skew actual decision making. Because why make a game for as many people to enjoy when you only need to make it as enjoyable to get a handful of people spending hundreds to thousands regularly on it? And there's no reason to really try to make super mass market appeal otherwise. Now
Yeah,
people
Super
still
Mario 3D All Stars sold 9 million copies. There's no way they're not going to do more cash ins like
yeah.
that when that was that successful.
So yeah, 9 million at $60 US for the sake of the conversation. And we don't know what the budget was for making those games. We don't know how long they were working on it for what that cost them. And if we compare that, I betcha, unless something says otherwise, that they made a huge profit off of that. Because we don't even know how much of that was profit. Um,
They hired the guy who did the remaster of Mario 64
yeah, right.
off the
If
street.
if they hired like three people and only did like a commission deal or like a a contract deal with those, and they paid them like a fraction what they pay real employees, like we don't even know that stuff, which they might not have. Nintendo, I would assume that Nintendo probably is a stickler, and they're like, no, only our salary employee, or they hired some dude for a while. But we don't know. We and that's part of that. We can only kind of go as like what seems fair off the consumers, and of course, part of this conversation is advocating for like the industry is shady. It's super shady, and it's really not fair because they're really are we're mostly getting fleeced. And so that's where like it'd be better, and even for the indie stuff, for them to they would have be able to compete better knowing just how far they stand compared to AAA studios. And we know from a fact that these indie studios like do well off of at lower price points and sometimes even equivalent numbers of copies sold. That it's you can totally succeed at different levels. But if the information was out there, it would change perception, as we were talking about earlier, of like quality versus quantity, and then also, oh, what does it mean to cost this much, and why are you charging this much for DLC, and is that worth it? And our complete value perception would change if we had more of these numbers to talk about and be able to go, yeah, Nintendo really shouldn't be charging for Smash Bros. DLC. Because at the same time, what is it? It's like it's $30 for the season pass, which is the 5 characters, which is like $5 cheap. It's like getting one character for free, at least for season pass 2.
It's
Um,
$25 for the first one, which is 5 characters, and 30 for the second one, which is 6 characters. So it's $5 a character if you buy the pass.
yeah. Um, and those come with the obviously a character includes the character, the stage, uh, all the music that comes with it, which varies widely between uh which character comes with it. Like Terry Bogard got like 40 or 50 new tracks, and then we have like Sephiroth, who's one of the biggest characters in gaming for not talking even for cloud because that was on Wii U, so that's a whole other thing. Is that like Sephiroth only added like 8 new tracks or something like that, bring it or 7, bringing it up to like 11. Like there's a huge
Did Hero even get that many? Because I know the Dragon Quest music is like weird with its rights.
yeah, but I think Dragon Quest, and that was the funny part. Like Dragon Quest, I think got like about 20 tracks,
Oh wow.
and they pulled from all the different games. Whereas with Final Fantasy, with Sephiroth and Cloud, they only pulled from Final Fantasy VII. So it's like there's already precedents from the same company for that they could have put in other Final Fantasy music, and they didn't. They just were like, nope, just 7 music, and we don't even know where all that weird stuff is. That's getting away from the point, which is the value proposition's weird, but even then, like Nintendo is making enough money off of each copy of those uh, sold that instead of every time one more person spends $40 on the game after they've made their back their money, because they've obviously it's been super profitable. Every time someone new, if they release another character, one person buys that game at the $40 price point, they've already paid. That's more than what they would have gotten for that. The only thing is they're just tacking it on. So now that person paid 40 on a sale price if they got lucky and Smash was on sale. But most likely they paid 60.
Smash has never been on sale. I mean, there are
Has
websites
it?
that track. Nope.
It's never been
I
on sale.
think
Okay.
the lowest it's been is in physical, like $50, but it hasn't had like. But that's been like, I
Mm.
think that's been like Walmart, but there's been no digital sale on Smash.
Okay, so no digital sales. So we know that. We don't know digital
That's
numbers.
like the one Nintendo game where you are not getting a deal. You're not getting a deal on the game itself, and you're not getting a deal on the DLC. You are going to pay almost $120 for the whole game.
Maybe
Yep.
like a greatest hits collection. Although I don't
They
remember
don't really do that, yeah.
any of the other. I remember there was a greatest hits collection for the Wii. I don't know
Yeah,
if there was for the Wii U.
I was actually gonna correct myself. I'm sorry, Mike. You were correct. Is there? Yeah, I think Brawl was maybe part of a greatest hits, whatever their greatest hits line of games was towards the
Yeah, I'm
end of the
not
Wii
sure
release.
if Brawl was or not.
And there
Yeah.
I
was
know that.
Nintendo Selects on 3DS.
And then there's that too, yeah. But that's also a cheaper price point, so that naturally has that inclination to it. So yeah,
So I have a thought.
go ahead.
Flipping the script. Are there any games that either of you would have paid more? Like maybe you didn't pay full price, but would you have paid more than $60 in hindsight in terms of how much value they've given you? Because I know right now I'm playing, and I will eventually finish. I got last Black Friday I got Persona 5 Royal for $20,
Mm-hmm.
but me knowing now how much I am enjoying it and how much time I'm going to end up getting out of it, I think it would have been worth 80 or more. I mean, it's really a great game and a lot of value out of it. And if I had to spend 70 on Persona 6, I probably wouldn't complain too much.
So I can make the direct comparisons to like the games that I've played where I've bought a bunch of DLC, and then that's kind of proof in the pudding that I've spent more, or like I've spent um extra money on special editions. So Borderlands 2, I bought the super special edition from that game for that game, and then I bought all the DLC for it as well. I forget if the season pass was actually included at that time or if their season pass came later. But either way, and I think they did 2 season passes for Borderlands 2. I'd have to double check, but say at least one for now. Um, so clearly I spent like 120 on that, and the amount of fun I had, like hindsight, absolutely worth it. Would probably say like Borderlands 2. And I rebought it. I bought it on Xbox 360 at first, and then I ended up rebuying it on PC, all the content as well. Didn't play it as much on PC at that time, but that was the times, and there was no chance of crossplay at that point. So um, yeah, that game totally like 120, 150, and it was broken up over time. Well, no, I bought the. Actually, I don't remember what the Borderlands 2 Special Edition was price wise. Let me look that up. Uh, Borderlands 2. But so I would say that Witcher 3, I bought the 2 expansions for that. That game, like those big open world games, clearly like $100 to 120 or more, like yes, worth it. We already just talked about Smash Ultimate. I bought all the DLC for that game. That's a game series where I have totally been like I spend the money there. Fighting games in general, I've usually bought the base game for 60, bought their upgrades multiple times at 60. I have different feelings about that now, but I've definitely enjoyed fighting games to the point where I think, eh, like not at their original price, but where they ended up, I totally think like there's value to be had there. But that's there's that. I've rebought Kingdom Hearts a bunch of times, so I guess for some of these bigger games, or even like we brought up the example, Rocket League. Rocket League, I spent $20 on when I bought it on PC, and that game is totally like a $60 game. I think there's no question that something with that much replay value, that's like a sports game like that, all the and while the loot box stuff is not well done in my opinion, it's I could see it if that stuff was a little more accessible. I could easily see that being like um, a $60 game or a bit more because of just how much you can get out of that and all the content they've added now. That game is much more pricey with all the events, the training stuff that they put in, or not the training stuff, but the events, the cross play, the different modes and things like that, that game's uh, totally worth it. So yeah, I definitely think there's that. And then we just kind of have to bring it back to what's the market willing to pay? Is it really fair for them to charge that? There's nothing stopping them, clearly.
DLC is a good point. I mean, that is a way to pay more for a game, but it still gives people the choice in how much they want to pay. I haven't paid for that many DLC upgrades. I mean, the only one I can remember in recent memory is the Fire Emblem Three Houses DLC, which, like, proportionally, I don't know if it was worth what I paid, but as a whole package, I mean, I liked it, and I still need to go back and play more of it because the DLC gives you more characters and more features that are used in a later playthrough. So there's still more gameplay for me there.
And
But
you got the Super Smash, right?
yeah, I did get the Super Smash. I don't know. I didn't love all those characters. I almost got them just because I wanted to try them. And when I play with you guys, I don't want to not be able to select the characters that you're playing. I get a little jealous. So there's kind of a bit of a peer pressure there. And there's also a bit of completionist neuroses there where oh, I gotta have all the characters. I certainly could have just bought ones that I liked. I could have waited and tried them out on with you guys and just only picked the ones that I would actually play. But
Oh, and
you
that's the
know
thing. The
yeah,
pandemic obviously made it difficult for us to play
yeah,
locally, and also with the living situations for us, we're not all in the exact same areas. But
yeah.
but there is no way to try those characters because you love Byleth. Do
I
you
like
think
Byleth a lot.
do you think you would have been able to tell by watching a trailer like that you liked Byleth, or would you have looked up YouTube videos like for each character to figure out whether you would have liked them?
Uh Yeah, maybe. I think I could tell that I wouldn't like Minecraft Steve. And I really had no interest in Terry. Who else was there? Min Min, I probably wouldn't have bought because arms, who cares?
Is there any
Hero,
character?
hero,
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Is there any characters on paper that actually you thought looked cooler than when you actually played them
Um,
so far? You can even include the regular roster because some of those include DLC from the Wii U version. So is there any of the characters that on paper you saw and they're like, oh, that looks cool, I think I'll like them, and then you played them, you're like, oh no, and then vice versa?
I've generally liked the characters from franchises that I like, but I will say I don't like Joker. I just don't like the way he plays. So,
Right.
I'm not necessarily gonna like a character just because I like the source, but usually I do.
Yeah. Go on.
Oh, I was gonna say I thought from Minecraft Steve, I thought he would be a lot more fun to play
Mm,
than he's just he's very technical and I didn't think that
yeah, I
it
agree.
would be like that.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
agree.
I can tell if a character is gonna have some weird gimmicks that are way different from other characters, I'm just not gonna enjoy it because I do, I like my anime sword fighters. That's pretty much what I like. I like my Byleth. I liked Para and Mithra.
Yeah, I thought Pyron Myth was definitely fun. I thought Steve was going to be more fun um, than what I didn't expect him to be as technical a character, and I think that is
Yeah,
actually a problem where I think they went a little too technical with it. It's really impressive what they did with that, but I think it should have been simplified for that
just the
because
mining is so hard to mine and fight at the same time.
yeah, I've seen people do really technical stuff. Like the character's super technical, so you can do a lot of impressive stuff with him. But I think for utilizing the block building properly is really tricky. Also, the resource management they threw in there, which yes, that's part of Minecraft, but I do think it's kind of funny. It's definitely not as simple as, even though I don't love this mechanic, but it's there and I get it. Is Splatoon's ink management, or the Inkling's ink management, which granted, just every once in a while you have to hold down to recharge, so it's not really that much different than how like with Samus you have to charge up a shot, the charge shot, or with Robin you charge up
Yeah,
the stuff and hold it and release it at the right times. So it's just, I think for Steve being that being a character I identify with a more casual audience, the fact that they would make that character so much harder to play for doesn't make sense for the type of people who are going to play that character or wanted to buy that character. It
yeah,
feels like a betrayal to them. For me, I'm like, okay, well, this is weird, and that's fine. I want all the characters, and I'll mess around with Steve here and there, but I'm not gonna. No, I'm not maining this character. Okay, so back on point. I looked up the original price for the Ultimate Loot Chest edition of the um, of Borderlands 2 was $150. So I spent $150 up front on that game, plus, uh, let me
Is
just
that
double.
the one with came with a bunch of junk?
Yes, it did. Although some of that junk was cool, like the posters and the bobblehead, like that's fine. The map, whatever. The loot chest itself is really cool because you can put stuff in it, so it's just it's a little storage chest. Great.
Did you buy the Cyberpunk special edition? One of my friends
No.
bought that, and he got like the bike figure, and I think it was like $300. I don't know why he buys those, because like know what he did with the big statue that came with it? He put it up in his attic. So it's like, why are you gonna buy something if you're just gonna put it in your attic? But
Yeah, it
you
doesn't
know,
look like a season pass came with it. So then I did end up spending extra to buy the season pass. So I clearly spent like I spent 150 plus I think like 30 or 40 or something. So, close to 200 on that game, all well and told. Um, so yeah, I've definitely done that, and some of that was a little bit piecemeal, but that was a bit, and that was also back in the time before I was much more financially stable. But so 150 was still like a lot to spend on one thing. I got more than my money's worth out of it. Then I bought the PC version again, which I probably got on a sale, but I don't remember exactly what I paid for that plus the DLC. So yeah, there's definitely stuff there. I think there is value proposition, and but I guess it does say now. Oh, and then I bought Borderlands 3. I think I spent like $90 to get the game with all the season one pass content, and then I ended up buying the season pass 2, and I think that total up to about $90 total when I eventually did all that. So um, it's so I definitely think it's okay. Would they have lower initial sales? Of course, but there's also what if they put out all the season pass content? And that's the other thing. Like I've been waiting for Immortals Phoenix Rising. I've been waiting for them to put out all of the DLC they have for that game because when I saw the roadmap, it made me hesitant because I thought maybe the main game's actually shorter. But if once all the DLC's out and I saw it was like 3 kind of story expansions, and then I checked in on the trailers, now all that stuff's out and I see it, I'm like, oh, it seems like they've made some pretty sizable upgrades to that game. And now when I buy it for whatever price I buy it when I get there, which will most likely be after I've beaten Resident Evil 8 and Nier Replicant, that'll probably be my next big game. Um, will be if those two games don't get me to the Mass Effect collection, because then I'm going to replay the Mass Effect trilogy. Um, but then I want to buy that, and I don't know what price I'm going to get that at. So that's a weird thing where I don't know what I'm paying for because I'm also I also had a chance to try it, but sight unseen, yeah, it's weird.
Ubisoft games are a weird situation because they're usually like half off within like a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
So like Ubisoft games, unless you like absolutely have to play Assassin's Creed the day it comes out, you can wait 30 to 90 days and probably get it for $30. That's just a very that's almost always the pricing, curve for those.
Yeah.
So Ubisoft is weird.
But at the same time, even when there isn't a limit, just like the Mario 3D All Stars proves, FOMO works. FOMO sells. So
Yeah,
people buy all these games early. People pre-order. Now, before when it was all physical and there literally was going to be limited copies. Pre-ordering made more sense. But now pre-ordering is led to a lot of bad stuff where they're holding out all these little perks and stuff like that. I technically bought Resident Evil Village on pre-order because I bought it like 2 minutes before midnight on Steam, so I could preload it in time to kind of play it as soon as possible that night. And it, I got the pre-order bonus stuff, which was just they give you some free items in the shop, and I still haven't picked them up because I'm like, well, I don't want these. I don't like bonus item DLC that's like gonna kind of change the balance of the game. Which, granted, it didn't force it into my inventory. It just put it there, and it's like these are free. You can claim them whenever. So I can still play the game in its default state, and I just don't have to. I just resist the temptation to pick the extra stuff
are they
that
just
was
like
free.
overpowered guns or something?
No, they just give you like a free extra stack of ammo for 2 guns and a health thing.
Oh,
I
because the Persona 5 Royal like bonus content is like all these overpowered personas that,
yeah.
like, I guess you could use them, but they burn through your SP really. I don't know. I wouldn't want to use a gun that's going to change the whole balance, or a weapon or something that's going to change. I agree with you. I don't want to change the balance of the game just
Now,
because I pre-ordered.
now, if that was the balance thing that was put into easy mode, like you get these free things, or for
Yeah,
Persona, like the easy mode starts you with some super powerful personas.
yeah.
That makes sense because you pick the mode and it's built into the game. But as like a pre-order incentive, I'm like, who's that for? But some people, they have more money than time, and I don't know how I feel about that. Um, that's the other thing. So we've been talking a bit about DLC. So do you think that if games are going to have a DLC roadmap, would you want the base games to be cheaper? So let's say, for example, Smash Brothers, because I think they pretty much announced there were going to be DLC characters. But we'll use that as an example because we know we all play it and we know we value it highly. If we would have known there was going to be at least 2 season passes of characters, fingers crossed for a third, I think, in this group, but there's at least the 6 characters, counting Piranha Plant, the 12 characters. If you would have known that, if that would have been like out there and companies say with the season passes that they're going to be out there, should we be expecting developers to go, well, okay, $30 now and $30 later, and that'll total up to 60?
Well, they only announced the one DLC pass to begin with, right?
They did, and I think that was like right before launch because they also announced Piranha Plant, and then they announced like there will be 5 more characters. So, Mike, do you personally feel like Nintendo should have sold, like, from your expectation, like, would you have wanted Nintendo to sell it for, let's say, 35?
40.
Yeah,
Wait, you
35
both
or
said
40,
different numbers. Sorry.
35 or 40, and
Thir-
then the 25 to make it up to 60. Not knowing that it would be a second one. Let's assume the second for your scenario there, because I think that makes sense. You didn't have that knowledge at launch, and they didn't make it public. So like, could they do uh to total up to 60? Would you have? Do you think it's more fair to us as consumers to be like, it's not a complete package yet, so you're still working up to that 60, or do you feel like the base game is full price and it makes sense for them to attack on more cost?
Um, I mean that's hard because the base game of Super Smash is pretty like complete. Like you don't really need more characters. It seems like it was a pretty complete package from the beginning. Like you could play it without ever needing any DLC characters. So I don't think necessarily that it was unfair that they charged more for DLC after the fact.
So do you think like base game should be cheaper if there's going to be DLC? Then she'll end up paying
If
more in the long
there's
run. Like as a principle, like don't even consider like it being an existing game because clearly like you're a Star Wars fan. You're going to pay ridiculous amounts of money for Star Wars. But like in general, if you find out a game is going to have more money and you're going to buy that game, like do you think it would be more fair for it to be cheaper since they're just going to add more?
depends how complete that game is.
Mhm.
Like Super Smash felt like a complete game. Ultimate felt like a complete game without the DLC. So it's not like, oh well, this DLC was originally, or I didn't really feel like it was originally going to be in the game, the characters.
And you know what doesn't
uh,
feel like a complete game, and I don't think they could get away with charging for the updates, is Animal Crossing New Horizons. Because I think a lot of the stuff they added in the updates is
yeah,
stuff that should have been in the base game.
but that's
But
all free.
They
yeah,
did,
and I'm
yeah.
saying
It retroactively it was
I'm
free.
saying it makes sense that it is free. I think that like I if I'd rather, like, I mean, like you asked, the Smash should be cheaper in the season pass. Like I think it could either be cheaper and have the season pass or the DLC bring it up to the full price, or they could just charge full price at the beginning, and just all the characters they add are just bonus for free. So either like the
But
tennis.
the game didn't feel incomplete. Like the original Super Smash Ultimate didn't feel like an incomplete game. Like it was missing characters and stuff. Did it?
Right, but it being cheaper just means you feel like you got a better deal out of the value. Like, holy crap, I can't believe this is only like 30, for the hypothetical. Oh, I can't believe this is only $30.
Yeah.
And then you spread that hype and everyone's like, wait, that was only 30? Like, holy, you get all this for 30? And like more people just buy it and buy it and buy it and buy it because like you're like Ed says, it's a deal.
I liked how
But then
Mario
also,
Tennis. I liked how Mario Tennis Aces added characters over the year. It was always fun to keep playing and say, "Oh, look, I got a new character." So
Yes, that was super cool though. Didn't you have to be subscribed to Nintendo Online to do those challenges to get them?
you didn't really have to do the challenges.
No.
You eventually
no?
got them. You
Oh,
think
okay,
if you
okay.
did the challenges, you got them early, but like I got all the
Oh,
you
characters.
just got them early
Yeah.
access.
Okay. But yeah, Ed.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mike. Why don't you
Yeah, go
finish
ahead, Mike, if you
your
want to finish
thought?
that.
Oh, I was just saying about how it cheapens the game.
What cheapens the
I
game?
don't. I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
It's okay. Hang on. So I was gonna say, Ed. So like, what's your thought? Like, if you know games are gonna have DLC, do you believe that it should be that should affect the price of the base game?
I don't really have that expectation, to be honest, because at least most Nintendo games, kind of like Mike said, they feel like they are complete titles when they're out. Like I didn't feel bad about there being an expansion pass for Three Houses because I thought the base game was very meaty. So I don't.
Right, but you haven't played it yet. In this situation, we're talking about things you haven't played that because you don't know. Like, even if you're a fan of Fire Emblem, you don't know if Three Houses is any good. And okay,
What's funny thing is I really wasn't a big fan of Fire Emblem before that game.
Yeah.
I kind of just took a risk on it because I saw a lot of the preview coverage. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. But
yeah. And that's what I'm getting at is here we're talking about expectations because a lot of this time we don't have the chance to try. And if you go put out your own effort, there's ways for you to mitigate the costs to yourself. So we're talking about the actual principles of the base price of the game for standard consumers when you don't go out of your way doing other things that like to try it. Like no one forces a demo down your throat. It's great when developers do put out demos, but no one makes you play a demo. No one makes you rent a game. No one makes you like subscribe to Game Pass. No one makes you do any of that stuff.
Owada comes to your house and sits down with you and makes you play the game.
Please understand.
Play the demo.
Please understand.
Yeah. So that's where you got to take that thing like this is a sight unseen hypothetical is a new game is coming out. They announce that DLC is going to come out is going to be released post launch. Should that affect in your opinion, do you think that should affect the base game like the value of the base game for the price there to know that you're inherently not getting a complete game?
No, I don't think so. And maybe that's just because at this point I'm conditioned to be like, okay, $60 for the base game. But like I said, I didn't feel like the base game was lacking. Perhaps if I felt like everyone complained about, well, I don't know if everyone, it sold well, but a lot of people online complained about Super Mario Party being lacking in content. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if I bought that game for full price and they didn't put many updates like they did with
But they updated it now.
They updated to have online.
And there was no guarantee for that too, yeah.
And there's no new content. Like with the amount of boards in that game, I would have felt like if they added DLC trying to sell me more, I think I would have been mad because I don't think the base game there was.
They updated it 2 years later.
Without any notice, they would do it. Also.
But they didn't update it with content. They updated it to add online. Like there's no new. The update doesn't have any new content.
No, I thought that was funny.
But if they were trying to sell me new boards and new mini games on top of a base game that was already lacking of content, I would have been upset. But I didn't buy it. So that's just an example of one game that I think a lot of people felt was incomplete for the $60 price.
Right. And we can't tell how complete a game feels to us until we've played it and beat it. Like, I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. Like I said, I'm playing Village right now. And I played Resident Evil 2 Remake, I played Resident Evil 3 Remake, and just putting those two together. Did I feel that Resident Evil 2 was worth $60? Yes. Did I think Resident Evil 3 was worth $60? No. Even though they tried to justify it with the multiplayer pack-in, which I never booted up, never installed, never going to, don't care. Uh, what they did with Resident Evil 3 was very disappointing for a $60 game. Now, there's also a lot of people who would still say Resident Evil 2 wasn't worth $60 because even though the main gameplay experience may only take like 10 to 12 hours on your first playthrough, and people will go 10 to 12 hours, that's not worth $60. I need to be getting at least 50 hours out of a game, etc. So that's where, even with Fire Emblem, you could say like, oh, you get like 50 to 80 hours out of a single playthrough, and you get even more if you actually do all 3 runs for all the different story combinations, or if even different romance plots for different characters or different relationships. Let's say relationships, because they're not all romance. Someone's like, I'm not going to do that though, so that to me is, or all these are disappointing, so that's still not 60. And then they find out, well, there's more content, so what's the point? So not even everything I could have done is in the game already. But yes, there is a difference in perspective, but you can only tell that till after. It's like, so what's setting the expectation is $60. This base game needs to, what is $60 worth, which differs per game, like we've said, and then you're adding onto it, and you can only tell whether or not that feels like they added onto it based on how good that initial package is. Now I don't know exactly how long Immortals Phoenix Rising's like base game is, but I made an assumption based on my experience from previous games and Ubisoft in general, and knowing that so I was like, there were other games that were also there, so it was easier to wait. But I might be getting a huge game, and I might play the base game, but oh, that base game was totally worth $60, and then this all is definitely just tacking on more of things I like plus some new stuff. So
I kind of agree with the idea that 10 to 12 hours is a little light for a $60 game. Like I wanted to play Luigi's Mansion 3, and I ended up borrowing it from a friend, but I wasn't about to spend $60 on that when it's a short game. And it's also like I wasn't guaranteed that I was going to like it. So, part of it is if it's unknown and $60 and short, then, it's tough for me to justify. Like it's a number of factors, but yeah, $10.
And you didn't care about the multiplayer modes either.
No.
So like all that, those extra bits of value didn't matter to you. So that goes into that value proposition.
And even like I want to play the new Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but that's going to be $70, and like those are not long games. I mean, and some people, there is a lot of replay value to those games. Like you can collect all the weapons, then you can go through the challenge mode and get like the higher version of the weapons. And I did that with the old Ratchet and Clank games when I was younger, but I probably wouldn't do that these days. So
yeah, and depending on go on. Mike.
Oh, I was gonna say we need a new Blockbuster.
Gamefly.
Yeah, kind of.
And we used to have Redbox, but they got rid of all their games. I guess people were stealing them too much. They were just like putting in fake games into the.
That's hilarious.
Do they even have Redbox anymore?
Yeah, they do. I've seen it at my local grocery store.
I didn't see it at like.
I always look. I use that just to see what movies have come out and stuff like that. There's like all those like little titles that I miss that sometimes like, I wonder what that is. That might be up my alley. How did I not hear about that? And then there's the big ones like, oh, that's out now on Blu-ray, so I could probably buy that off Amazon if I really want to, or maybe it's available for streaming. So
I wish you could do a digital rental like you can with movies, a digital rental of games. Like I would pay like $5 to like rent a game for a night or 2 days like you can with a movie just to try it out.
I think PS Now does that.
They did, or that used to be like their business model to start with. They sold you time, but they don't do that anymore.
And I think it was only like when you rented, it was only streaming enabled.
Yeah.
So that way you never had the data on your hard drive, because clever hackers, if you download the data, they'll just copy the game and crack it. So they were trying to do anti-piracy. But yeah, and that's the one thing I thought with like streaming games would be really useful, where there's much more incentive. I'm not a fan of streaming because it's not quite a um it's not up to the point where you can get an accurate experience of what a game feels like and plays like because of possibilities of lag. So that's the unfortunate downside, but I feel like it would be good um, for renting. It's letting people be able to try, because then developers don't have to worry about piracy, so you just get to try the game and see that. But there's another way to do that. There's demos, and we've seen nowadays where they'll put like a certain amount of the game up and you get to play it for a certain amount of time. Although sometimes developers make mistakes and they, give you the full version with just code that tries to lock you out of the rest, and then others actually do like it's just a portion of the game, and so you can just play that and try it. And then progress carries forward and things like that. So I
That's a
think,
great way to do a demo where you just start the game, and if you like the game, you can continue your progress from the demo into the full game. I
yeah, I
think that's
agree.
ideal. That's
That is ideal.
ideal.
That is ideal, and I hope that they focus in on that and they try and start making like, so it's not the full game. You download like 10% of the game, and then you just play that opening intro or whatnot, and then you figure that out. Maybe Xbox will do that with Game Pass or do something like that where they'll do that. Although, that's the point of the Game Pass right now, is you're paying a monthly fee and then you can try all these games and you download them too, so it's an accurate experience
Well,
and
Game
whatnot.
Pass, you get all the Microsoft exclusives right away.
Right, and there's that too. So that's also great value, just objectively. Brand new games, day one launch on your streaming service at no additional cost to you. So,
When they start having brand new games, they don't have any right now.
they had a few, but not much yet. Um, yeah. So yeah, with the pricing here, it's really tricky because I feel like we don't have the numbers, because I really want to base it off of being fair, because I don't think companies should make no profit. I'm just against like Activision and EA and making like mega profits with no reason, and having not being able to justify that like their creativity is bankrupt, and they're turning this into like a bubble economy for the games industry, and it's going to pop and it's going to explode, as well as making more reasonable expectations and trying to educate the general consumer that like, hey, like this is okay, and like, or this is where it's unfair. To briefly bring up Days Gone, now I don't like what the guy's comments are because he's off base when it comes to like how that goes, but it does make sense that like Sony could have totally bankrolled a Days Gone too. Sony made the call that's like, oh, this wasn't good enough, or whatnot, and it's at least cool that they greenlit it to go on PC. But and hopefully it'll have like a life there, and maybe they'll eventually be able to revisit Days Gone, uh, or in the concept or whatnot. But it is something to say like these companies do make enough money off their sales that they can totally bankroll smaller, more creative projects. They totally could be providing us more DLC. Ghost of Tsushima, props to them for putting out that multiplayer mode later and not charging extra for it. Could they have? Of course. I think they could have totally charged it for $20. Would have many people have played it? Probably not, but they would have made more money off it. And they just did a value proposition there where they threw all that stuff in and just said, "Hey, we were working on this, wasn't ready for the main game. Now here it is. It's just additional content for you to play, and we'll patch it a little bit over time." Perfect value proposition. And it just, the games from their initial sales, like they make enough money that they could do this, and they're supposed to be, as game studios, making other projects and then putting out and then everything is funneling back into the company, and that money pool should be going out to continuing their brand so that they can make money into the future and then grow. And okay, if an idea doesn't sell as well, then yes, maybe that doesn't get as much attention, or it needs to be a smaller thing, and we try these new ideas until we figure out our next big hits and we have our tent poles. It's
I think Sony deserves a lot of credit for the amount of new IPs they put out. I mean, what did they have in the they had Days Gone, they had Ghost of Tsushima, now they have Returnal. Before that, they had Death Stranding. Like they had Dreams, that was another one. I think Sony does do a lot of creative and different ideas.
They
Even if some of them are somewhat formulaic, like Horizon Zero Dawn was that typical open world game, but I think Sony puts a lot of money into new IP.
I would say Horizon Zero Dawn's atypical, but yes, it is like an open world RPG, but it had enough unique conceits in it to justify
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Um, and I don't really play Assassin's Creed, but I'm willing to say that like some of them probably do have good conceits. Like I almost played Assassin's Creed Origins because it sounded like it was such a huge drastic shift that it'd be worthwhile. And it was different enough between Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and I think what is it like Brotherhood, and then there's like the fourth one where it's like there. I'm very well aware of the time, guys, but we still I know what the pre-recording time was, so I know when it's going to cut off, and we actually still have time based on the buffer we had from warming up. So trust me, I've been watching the timer closely. So that's the thing is
for those that are listening, we have a time limit because Mike is on his AirPods today, and as good as Apple products are, they do not last long enough.
Well, actually, yeah, he shouldn't be showing us the time on his Game & Watch thing. He should be showing us his iPhone with the battery symbol on there. Because then it's like, he shows us that, and it's like, oh, look what time it is. And then I'm like, but you have 70% left on your charge? I own a pair of iPods too. I know you're good. Don't try to squeeze out this. But right, trying to have the conversation.
I'm in the doghouse.
Well, you were both tapping your watches at me, and like, trust me, yeah, because I'm the one who edits these, so it's my time when it comes to editing. And the longer we go, the longer it takes to edit.
Yeah, that's a little behind the scenes for everyone.
Yeah, a little BTS there.
How the sausage is made.
Yeah, and that's what goes into. So if you're thinking of starting your own podcast, there, remember it takes time to edit, and if you're the only person who edits and you can't take turns with someone else, then it's you've got to factor that in if you're trying to do a regularly scheduled program. But anyways. Talking about the value, I wanted to bring this up too with the price of games. And service games are different, and I think that they should be treated differently in pricing. And my favorite example is when I tried Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO RPG by I think BioWare did create that as well. Despite what that game is, I'm not a big fan of MMORPGs. I think their gameplay loop is very poor. I like action RPGs. I think their pseudo whatever style is not. It's not fun to play, and I understand for people they're like, well, the social aspect. I'm like, right, but if I'm not having fun doing the activity with my friends, even when my friends are there, that's not really. I don't want to do an annoying activity with my friends unless I absolutely have to. I'd rather be doing a fun activity with my friends, and I think that drags it down. The gameplay actually drags down the fun.
It would be super cool if they did an MMO with like action RPG gameplay.
They do have games like that, but then they're still like free to play and microtransaction.
Yeah.
So you can look them up, and I've tried to find a couple of them. Like I'm looking forward to trying out Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, because that looks
that looks cool. That looks cool.
Right. I think Black Desert Online also has like true action style. There was another game I played before. I have to relook up the title that was like that. So I'm always on the lookout. But those games usually have the other annoying things. Warframe's a great game where it's more of an action RPG with like very tight mission structure. That's fun online, but that's also free to play and it has its own quirks. But out of all of them, I do recommend that one because it's not actually an MMORPG. It's an action game. But no, Star Wars: The Old Republic. It was $60 up front, but then it was $15 after that to maintain your membership. And that made no sense to me because if it actually costs $15 a month for you to maintain your membership, why aren't they charging me $15 up front? Because that's where the value is. You can't play that game offline. Like, even though you're downloading stuff to your thing, you have to be connected to the server. You have to be connecting and getting updates and push that. You can't play that offline and not use their servers. So
this is the last one, right? Not the original Old Republic.
No. Knights of the Old Republic is what you're thinking of, and those are just console games. The Old Republic is just the MMO RPG.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar name structure, very easy to confuse. So stupid. But that's the thing. If it was like, oh yeah, you're $60 and then you can play this game all by yourself and never connect to our service if you don't want, but then you're paying the $15 to maintain your connection and use those servers, connect with other people, etc. that makes perfect sense. But that's not how it goes. So it doesn't actually make sense other than mitigating costs for themselves because they're like, well, people are going to play and drop off. But that's not my problem. So why are you charging users 15 off that? There could also be some offset costs because when they start up, they're also trying to prevent people from overloading their servers, which they always do anyway. So that doesn't even matter. That's an invalid argument. Um, so yeah, it's really just there to try and gouge people because they know they might not stay hooked on the game for long, so they get, what is it? It'd be 4 months actually off a person for 30 days. It's only included for 30 days. And sure, they do like promotional periods and things like that, but I'm talking about just right at launch, sight unseen. You only have previews and whatever public information they chose to put out and whatever they chose to explain. The value proposition didn't make sense. So that's where I'm going, like, where's the fairness? And ultimately, yes, we don't have enough information for us to make like really informed consumer opinions, and they, as businesses, kind of have the freedom to just do whatever, and people either buy it or they don't. And the other part where I think it's really worthwhile to have this conversation is about that's unfair to consumers because people can only buy what is created. Now, of course, we have indie developers, so they can make games there. But at the same time, no matter what, when you put out a product, you only can people can only buy what you choose to create, unless you literally like crowdsource your idea and people are like and you're taking in feedback and going, we're going to make this. And some games do that. Like Hades had that like weird kind of early access period when it was on the Epic Game Store, and they constantly made the adjustments and updates till they reached their polished final 1.0 version, which was essentially crowdsourced, peer reviewed to the point that it received this refinement. But not every game does that. They do use like feedback from previous games and things like that, mixed with their own developer design decisions. Um, and then there's all those extra hidden costs, and we just don't know all these numbers or where it's fair to do this and be able to then educate ourselves as consumers to get rid of those stigmas of, well, $40 means it's a cheap game. No, maybe it's just this is a new game. We realize that you have never tried this before, and we want you to try it. And even if you like, sure, you could wait to go on sale, but there's the game industry or the game culture is so skewed towards you have to play when it's at launch.
I mean, do you
Everyone's gonna
really
talk about it.
think that if we got those numbers and budget and marketing and everything, I don't think that would change that much, because I think the average average gamer consumer is not clued into those things like we are, or like even people who listen to podcasts are. Like, I kind of doubt that if that would change anything.
I think you can't underestimate the impact of information on people. And while it's not necessarily one to one, think of just how messed up Xbox brand situation has been ever since Xbox One. They're saying like online only was one of the things they were trying to do, and that
I guess
never left the public conscious.
That got out to everyone, and people still think that.
People still think that, even though it's kind of true. What we were talking about? What Xbox
Well,
Series X?
It is true. It is true. You can't activate an Xbox without a Microsoft account. It's useless until you get online. So it is true.
Right. Exactly. And you can't activate the Series consoles without it being connected to online to download the latest firmware update. So yeah, right there. This stuff they did actually ended up doing it, and they just didn't talk about it now. But that's the thing. Like, you never know what piece of information is going to resonate with people. So if we had all that information, like, of course we've got our online keyboard warriors who are going to make loud noises, but them making loud noises prevented the Xbox Live price hike. It probably helped with Sony overturning their own internal decision to close the PS Vita and PS3 PSN stores as soon as they are. PSP is, of course, going away, but it's probably that the demand for those wasn't that good.
Sony I bet you the PSP store technically was like way behind the PS3 and Vita I bet it's even harder for them to maintain. Might not just might it might also be a technical problem there.
Possibly.
But
And once again, we don't have the information for that as well.
I wish we did. It would be really interesting to
That's what I'm
know.
saying. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff where it'd be great to know. And just from my gatherings from like podcasts with people who do have slightly more insider connections or have been in the industry longer, the impression I'm getting is that a lot of these business decisions are made arbitrarily. Uh, People, and even I've just from my understanding from corporate America is that people usually at the higher pay grades are making decisions about things they really don't understand because their perspective on it at that macro level is has nothing to do with efficiency. It's just dollars, amounts, and spreadsheets, and that's a problem with corporate culture as well. Um, and then, oh yeah, the Epic versus Epic stuff that's coming out regarding all those details and background details. Sony charging for other companies for the crossplay because of their interpretation that if we're not your main driver of the player base, that you're then using our costs when we're losing money, and that's just not true. They're not losing that much money. No matter how much servers cost, they wouldn't be hosting servers if it cost that much. If it was um, that loose, they're just no company is just that generous. So that kind of insider information, the more that comes out, you realize just how messy and petty that stuff is, and it's really all about money rather than strategy. Or I guess it is strategy, but the strategy is not pleasing the consumer. The strategy is making money at everyone else's expense, which
Just play Game and Watch, then you don't have to worry about online updates or DLC or anything like that. Just Game and Watch,
is a great
you'll be
point,
all
Mike.
set.
I'm gonna pre-order 3 today just so it feels like I'm playing a different game
You
each
better
time.
head out to Best Buy. They're probably sold out.
Yeah, they
I'll
were
buy one
almost
off a
sold out
scalper.
when I bought it.
I don't want Nintendo getting any more money, so I'm gonna scalp it.
You're all right though about it not being about pleasing the consumer. I mean, it is nice when those interests overlap.
Yeah.
Like Apple, this is another thing about their whole privacy standpoint that they're introducing is that's good for the consumer in some ways, but it's also good for their wallet. But
Right.
it's not always the case that interests are aligned.
Yep. That it's usually they're trying to figure out where they make the consumer happy as little as possible at the to make their maximum profit. Um, at least in general, when you get to those big levels like Activision and EA, and clearly you can tell with all that stuff because of the whole
Yeah.
loot boxes
They're
and
not your
microtransaction.
friends.
They're not.
Companies are not your friends.
They're not. And the main takeaway I wanted from this conversation, in case it got clouded for any of our listeners, it's not that I'm advocating for games to be cheaper. That'd be nice. And by the nature of the tools getting better and the resources and game development as an industry just getting more accessible over time, this is about talking about the fairness of pricing, the health of the business, and creating and actually having like good long-term strategies, and hopefully helping you guys become more curious about what's actually going out there and what you're being fed and what you're and doing your best to vote with your wallet as much as you can, or at least make more informed decisions because we want to try and prevent as much. They get away with a lot of bad stuff just because they hide in a lot of information, and so we're not getting even today the value we could be getting while the company could still be successful. And that's my point. I'm trying to make it fair for the consumer and fair for the business because I'm not saying they shouldn't make money. I'm saying that maybe they shouldn't be making as money, or at least they're making money the wrong way and they're ultimately getting ready to tank both their business and our business, and they don't care. They don't, which sucks. But we do because, we have fun with it. And I think this is the games industry is unique in that this is such a different type of it's interactive. This is a very interactive thing where movie making's different. It's much more passive, and they're still very rabid fans. And I'm not downplaying them, but I'm saying it's almost more entwined in the activity to be involved in it. So it creates it elicits a different feeling, at least for me, I'll say. And I think for a lot of people, because you see the keyboard warriors as well, and I use that a little facetiously, but sometimes it works. Sometimes it's good to bully those companies and get them to stop doing the crappy thing. So that's ultimately there. It's about fairness, not necessarily just taking away money. It's about being fair. So yeah, any other closing thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the price of it's all about value. I mean, if I part of it is just enjoyment, how much I enjoy the game, but I also do look at how long I get out of the game. I don't, like I said, I want it to be long enough. I want to enjoy it. But like if a game is full price and I feel like I got the value out of it for that cost, I'm okay with it. So and honestly, like I don't necessarily care about how much it costs them to make. You know, if it costs them $10 to make and it's a really high quality game and they want to sell it for 60 and make a ton of money, like as long as I feel like as a consumer I'm getting the value out of it, I don't care if the price of it reflects their their costs. If they happen to have a huge hit and make a ton of money and I feel like I got what I wanted out of the game, then that's good for everyone.
I feel like that's a whole other conversation because you opened up the whole like stigma about time versus dollars, and that's a whole other argument. I think we'll save for a different episode
It's
there.
just a piece. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
Right, but I think there's a lot to explore there as well, and break down at
Yeah.
least for us personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just I mean, the standard $50, like that would just be for like for the AAA games and stuff like that. Um, but overall, like, yeah, I just want prices to be fair for when I'm buying a new game, and I don't really have anything besides that to add.
I
For
don't
sure.
think we're ever going to see $50 games again. I think those days are behind us
I
for
mean,
the
we
most
do, but
part.
not for like AAA. Yeah,
Yeah, for AAA.
So I'm just dreaming.
for the most part, inflation's the thing, so all the prices are just going to go up naturally because math. Um, But yeah, that's it. Our conversations about monetization in gaming are certainly not done for this podcast. We're gonna revisit and we'll find new points probably over time, and new information will come out, and we might do some episodes where we explore on that. But this is definitely more of some of the heavier topics we talk about more in serious tones. So we'll break that up between some of the more fun episodes that we've got. And there's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. We've got plans for the E3 and then doing a series of episodes breaking down and talking about each of the companies based on the state of where they're at, where they're going, and their history, and how we feel about all that stuff. So we've got a bunch of plans for episodes there. Specific games and stuff we're gonna have conversations on later. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff that'll break up um, those more the more serious discussions on just how weird monetization is for video games. So thank you everyone who listened to us today, and for all those who may join us in the future. Thank you so much. We hope you are well until the next time.
Bye.
Thank you.